apologize for the delay in getting this out, but in this video, we're going to be continuing the assembly of the shutter. Unfortunately, I did lose some of the video showing the cleaning of the mechanism plate, the front cover plate, as well as most of the levers. But we'll go ahead and get right in the video here and start the reassembly. So as you can see here, we have some of the gears here in some of the naphtha. Uh, and this is for just getting any sort of caked off grease on here. As you can see, I have gone ahead and reinstalled the shutter release lever here, as well as the actuator ring there. Put the main drive back on here. Now with the main drive, it does screw in from underneath the mechanism plate. The drive spring in here is similar sizing to what you would find in a pocket watch. So it could be replaced with a pocket watch spring. And then this part here, the main drive, I did go ahead and in that same cap that you see the springs in, I went ahead and soaked it in there for a bit, and then going in with a Q-tip, cleaning out any dried or chunky grease on there. In the video, I'm of course explaining all of this, but the audio is not so good coming out of my camera. You can also see some of the other levers I've already put in. Uh, Such as the one there. That one does go in after the lower levers. Now here on these pinion points, you do have to make sure that these are good and clean. Um, Otherwise, any sort of built up dirt or grease would slow up the mechanism itself. And here I'm just going back over a lot of levers as I put them in. There wasn't too much built up on them, but after the general cleaning, I did notice on some of them some additional just dry grease from previous lubrications. In many instances, a shutter like this, you would find a lot of over lubrication from people who don't have a lot of experience with the shutter. This lever I'm putting in here, you do have to put it in at an angle. And once you get this initial screw started, you would need to rotate the main drive barrel to get it into position. As you can see here, it doesn't have to move much, but it does need to move a fair bit, a little bit to get that anchor lever to move into position. I'm sure many have noticed how many Q-tips I do go through with this cleanup, but honestly, I would rather use more Q-tips than needed than to risk transferring any sort of dried or worn out grease into other parts of the mechanism. And here I'm just making sure that the gears themselves are good and clean. Looking for any sort of major corrosion, anything that may be stuck on there. And of course the middle pinion would go in first, being that it is the lowest. And then I've already placed the spacing shim onto the post for that third uh, gear there. And I was just making sure that that plate would go in smoothly. And the ratchet pawl here tried running away, but being it is a steel part, I do want to avoid using my hands to touch it, simply to avoid any sort of etching that the oils from my hand would cause. And once I've put that in, I do, of course, uh, move them, make sure that they are moving smoothly and with little to no resistance. And this is the watch oil I use on the pinions there for the gears. Um, you could also use a light sewing machine oil. The key though is to use just the bare minimum. Here I'm actually using the largest of my watch oilers. which it puts hardly any oil at all in each dip. But I apply the oil until I just see the oil itself form a continuous ring at the top. And here I'm just making sure that the oil itself did work down the shaft. Normally it would through capillary action, but with as lightly as I did oil these, I just want to make sure it does work its way down. And then just applying the retaining screw on the ratchet pinion. And the cover plate for the pinions screws in through the center wheel there. As you can see, I did have to hold that plate in place because of the size of the screws. The plate itself could actually pull away and drop the screws out of place. And those are definitely not screws that you would want to lose. Not only are they a unusual size that you can't just go out and purchase, but they are also very small and difficult to locate, especially if you're working over carpet. here I'm just doing a second clean on the anchor pawl just before putting that in. And right here I'm explaining the need for pre-tensioning on the main drive barrel, because with this lever here, this is the lever that actually sets the shutter time. And as you can see, just before I went to put it in, there is a recess, which I'm pointing out there, that lever actually sits underneath of, so it won't just slide directly down into place. You do need to have it out um, and then swing it into place after it's onto the retaining post or the pivot post. And here I'm just setting the spring for that lever. And just getting the this lever here in place as the screw tries to run away. And this lever is used for adjusting the uh, overall timing of the shutter by adjusting tension on the uh, barrel as well as the anchor pull. Okay, and at this point, most of the mechanism plate is complete. Uh, the mode lever would actually go on top there, but that is easiest to put in after it's all in the mechanism plate. So I'm going to go ahead and get the shutter blades put in. You can see the silver streaks there. When I first saw this shutter, I thought those were actual physical damage to the blades, but those are simply dried graphite, most likely a graphite grease that was dried out onto the blades. And just a little naphtha on a cotton bud. You can see that just comes straight out. You can see I also try to touch the blades as little as possible with my actual hands. simply to prevent any sort of fingerprints or etching into the surface from the skin oil, the oil of my skin. Now there is one blade with one edge removed, so it has a flat spot on the area where it pivots. That indicates blade number one. And there's one pivot that has two arrows next to it. That would be just indicating where that first shutter blade would go. And it was actually about here that I truly started to realize the markings I'd seen on the shutter blades themselves weren't actual physical damage, and how easily that they did come clean. Um, and of course, you can see the wear on that first blade that I put in because the angle of the light from where I was sitting, I couldn't see those wear patterns on there. But as long as the wear patterns don't interfere with the action of the shutter, they're nothing really to worry about. The only time you need to worry about those is when you can actually feel them with the cotton bud. As you saw there, I realized I hadn't gotten all of the schmuck off that one blade, so I went ahead and went back over it. Now, one thing you do need to be careful of with the shutter blades, there is a rivet on the one side. You need to be careful not to catch that on the cotton bud or to push down around it if it is resting on that rivet. Because if you press too hard, it will deform that shutter blade. Um, if not rip that rivet out. As I'm sure you can imagine, neither of those would be good because that would hamper the action of the shutter itself. And this is where I realized that with that first blade, I had not fully cleaned it. So I just went back over it. Because even though there are some wear marks on the blades, there was still a lot of just dried graphite on there. And then the third shutter blade here, the rivet goes into the pivot location in the um, actuator ring, and then a screw actually holds it to the mechanism plate. And it is a shoulder screw, so it does have a bit of a non-threaded point for the shutter itself to run on, the shutter blade itself. So as you tighten it down, you just want to make sure that that shutter blade is clear so that you don't pinch that shutter blade. And here with the cotton bud, I just go back over, make sure there's nothing I missed on cleaning them, as well as getting any sort of fingerprints and any sort of skin oil off of there as much as I can. And of course, being that the blades are in place over the center there, they are suspended. So be very careful about putting any sort of pressure. I honestly do not recommend cleaning them in place like that because it is very easy to press and damage them. And that's going to be it for this video. The next video should be up tomorrow. I do apologize again for taking so long, but I do thank you for your patience, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.